Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. This is Mr. G. Um, Sorry that I couldn't be in class with you. Today we are going to go over Unit 1.1. First, I'm going to go over the recap of everything that we should have for Unit 1.1. And then I'm going to get into the rest of Unit 1.1 and then possibly 1.2, or there may be another video. So, your assignment for today, for Tuesday, what you're going to do is I'm going to create the recap. I'm going to finish a little bit of where we left off, and then I may try to finish up 1.1 entirely, or I may leave that to another video for another time. Okay? So, right about now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my camera off and then I'm going to present what I need you to know. Okay. So, what we need to make sure that we have, all right, we need to make sure that we are in our notes in Cami and we have to unsubmit them, or I think you can continue typing, okay? So, make sure that you are typing. And depending on the class where we stopped, we have stopped at we've either stopped at the microscope or we have stopped at Robert Hooke. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue from that part. So first off, we're going to talk about the recap. So we're going to talk about life, okay, what it is, how do we classify it, and how do we understand it. So we've talked about the 7 characteristics of life: growth and development, reproducing offspring, heredity of traits, homeostasis, metabolism, cellular structure and composition, and responding to the environment. So these are just the terms. So we went over that life consists of all the requirements an organism needs in order to be considered living. Okay. Some things that you are familiar with are, not actually alive. Okay, like viruses. We watched that video, and then we learned that Aristotle was a philosopher who began the system of classifying animals based on a two-category system, plants and animals. Okay. While he created this system, he had no clue that organisms were alive beyond a mean that he could see. So he did not know that there were unicellular organisms and multicellular organisms. Okay. Then we get to Carolus Linnaeus. Carolus Linnaeus was famous for his work in taxonomy, okay, and scientific names. As I went over in class, the reason that a lot of organisms are classified are due to Carolus Linnaeus and the discoveries that he has made as far as taxonomic classification. So we went over what are those two organisms. Remember, the organism on the left is what cleans your eyelids when you sleep. Organism on the right is sand under a microscope. Microscopes, why they're important? Microscopes are important because without microscopes, we wouldn't be able to see these microscopic organisms. We wouldn't be able to tell how they look, what they're composed of. Do they have a nucleus? Do they have a mitochondria? Um, can they eat? Can they thrive? Can they reproduce? So without a microscope, we wouldn't be able to learn those things. And Robert Hooke was one of the few people, along with Anton von Leeuwenhoek, that made different improvements upon the microscope. So now we get to Robert Hooke. And Robert Hooke's main claim to fame is that he discovered what the cell was called. Okay, so basically he named it. All right, like your parents named you, Robert Hooke named the cell the cell. Okay, so before him, no one knew that living things were made of cells. Okay. We had ideas of what we thought living things were made of, but we did not have a concrete answer. Okay. So while looking at a piece of a cork, corks, they come in different types of bottles, the cap, the liquid, so it doesn't spoil or go bad. So he saw that corks had many small cells in there that were empty, but they also resembled jail cells during the time. Okay, they resembled jail cells and they also resembled the rooms that monks lived in. Okay, small cells. So he named it the cell. So cell theory. So now we're gonna start with the new notes. So cell theory and the scientists responsible for this theory. So question of the day. What do you think Anton von Leeuwenhoek first observed when he began using a microscope he built for himself? A, cells from a dead animal he found in the neighborhood. B, cells from his rose garden. C, a parasite that was living in his own poop. D, the gunk in his teeth. Or E, both C and D. So I'm gonna give you about 30 seconds to make an answer. If you said E, which is both C and D, you are correct. So he has discovered what were called animalcules in his own poop and in the gunk that was in his teeth. Okay. So this is in his own words, what he saw while looking at a sample of his own stool. Okay. Stool is just another word for poop. I have usually a morning a well-formed stool, but hitherto I have had sometimes a looseness of bowels. So I went to stool some twice, thrice, or 4 times a day. My excrement being so thin, I was devised times constrained to examine it, wherein I have sometimes seen animalcules a moving prettily. Their bodies was somewhat longer than broad, and the belly, which was flat lie, furnished with sun-dried little paws. So basically, Anton had a sickness of the stomach that made him go to the restroom a lot. And so he wanted to look at what was in his stool. So he took a sample, put it under his microscope, and discovered the things that were making him sick. So now we have prokaryotic cells versus eukaryotic cells. Okay. So it's important to know. Sorry about that. That was the school bell. So it is important to know that prokaryotic cells lack a membrane-bound nucleus. They're extremely successful group of organisms. They're the first cells on Earth. They're found in air, water, and soil. So prokaryotic cells are everywhere. They're divided into 2 groups based on whether or not they have DNA or RNA, sometimes called bacteria and archaea. Okay. Eukaryotic cells, which are us, we contain a membrane-bound nucleus. So all our cells have a membrane-bound nucleus. Okay. We were created due to endosymbiotic theory. Basically, one cell eats another cell. Okay. Like I said, plants and animals, and then the nucleus evolved as a result of invagination. Okay, so the action of or process of being turned inside out or folded back upon itself into a cavity or a pouch. Okay, so now endosymbiotic theory. I know that it's a big word, a huge word, scientific word, but it's not. It's not even a difficult concept to understand. So, endosymbiotic theory explains how a eukaryotic cell may have evolved from one prokaryotic cell eating another prokaryotic cell, okay? Symbiosis is a close relationship between two different organisms, okay? So that one cell eats that other cell, and then later the whole cell, it eats a prokaryotic cell that was capable of doing photosynthesis, all right? So one scientist that I did leave out until now, because we're going to talk about all the scientists that were responsible for cell theory. So I left out Robert Brown, Bobby Brown. So I left out Robert Brown, who was an English botanist, okay? And a botanist studies plants. So in 1831, while everything was getting moving and discovered and founded and observed for the first time, Robert Brown described what the nucleus looked like. Okay, and as a form and as a outcome of describing what the nucleus looks like, cytology was created, which was the study of cells. So he's the father of cytology. So now, and this is the last slide for this section, and then I'm going to have another video with the remaining slides about 1.1 if possible, or I think I may be going into 1.2 now. Okay, no, still 1.1. Okay, so let me finish. So Robert Hooke, along with other scientists, Matthias Schneiden, Theodor Swan, and Rudolf Virchow, okay, they added discoveries on what Hooke already observed. So Matthias, he saw that plants had cells. That may seem like an easy concept to understand, but in that day and time, it wasn't. You know, they looked at plants as a form of tool to use in certain medicinal products, but they didn't understand that plants were essentially the result of millions and trillions of cells coming together. They were a cellular organism such as us. Okay. Swan used the microscope to conclude that animals indeed had cells. Okay. So now we said if plants have cells, then animals have cells. And then 2 decades later, okay, which is 20 years, Rudolf Virchow combined all of this and said that all cells come from pre-existing cells. Basically, no cell exists without a cell in front of it. All right. And then we get to cell theory, which was everything combined together. Okay. So cell theory states that all living things are made of one or more cells. That's the first part of cell theory. The second part, the cell is the smallest unit of life. Second. And lastly, all new cells come from pre-existing cells. Okay. I know that says homework class question. You can just use that as an essential question. So if all things are made up of cells, then what are cells made of? Okay. You can Google that, but I'll pause and give you 20 seconds to think about it. So cells are made of something called macromolecules. And macromolecules, all they are just trains of small molecules that combine to make a cell. So many different things that derive and create that cell. Okay. So macromolecules are the substances that are responsible for cells due to joining of many molecules into a chain. All right. So these are important, but cells cannot function if they did not have the most important substance on earth, which are water. Cells are 70% water, okay? Just like our body is 75% water, all right? And we know that water is important for sustaining life. Water is also important for sustaining cell life, All right. Water also helps us maintain homeostasis, just like water helps cells maintain our homeostasis, our stable internal environment. All right. Then we have the different types of macromolecules. We have nucleic acid, either RNA or DNA. All right, that's genetic information that contains all the information about us. Then we have proteins. Okay, proteins are important because they help in the actions of the cells. Okay, and they're connected in long chains called amino acid molecules. Then you have lipids, which are large molecules that do not dissolve in water. They act as protection barriers in the cell. So they protect the cell from anything happening to it. Then you have carbohydrates, starches, and sugar, which are very important. Your body runs off of sugar. Everything you eat turns into a sugar or a carbohydrate to give you energy. Okay. And with that being said, that is the last part of Unit 1.1. Now, the next video will have Unit 1, Part 2, the organelles. Thank you for attending class. Now, what I want you to do, now that we have all the Unit 1.1 notes, what I want you to do, Unit 1, Part 1, I want you to go and click Save. The notes that I went over today will be in the Unit 1.1 Part 2 notes. Okay? So now turn in Unit 1.1 and Unit 1.2. And I will see you later.